Welcome to International Securities Exchange's podcast series. Facilitated by renowned educators, ISE podcasts are intended to teach beginning as well as seasoned investors the ins and outs of trading. To find an updated list of podcasts, please visit www.ise.com/podcasts. Please be sure to listen to our important message following this episode regarding the risks of investing in exchange-traded options.
Now, with that, I want to tell you a story. I actually did a presentation in Birmingham that night, and I met a lady, and she had just done her first, she had maybe done 2 or 3 trades, and she was very excited, and she had said to me, we were just kind of talking before the presentation, and she had so much excitement in her eyes that I could tell what she was excited about. And she had said, my account just went from $12,000 to $16,000 in one day. And it was that day, and so I'm like, okay, let me guess. You were bullish on the euro. And she was. She actually made a lot. She was actually on the right side of this trade. Now, she's an example of someone who made money in a quick sprint. Now, this is an analogy that I like to use with pretty much any presentation that I do. And what I want to mention here is that trading is a marathon. Trading is not a sprint. Let's say, for example, that we took the time of a champion marathon runner. Champion marathon runner's time, let's say, is approximately 2 hours and 10 minutes. Well, if we break that down, you're doing about a 5-minute mile for every one of the 26 miles that you do, approximately. And when you continue to break that down, you can do a 100-meter dash in 19 seconds. So every 100-meter dash you're doing in 19 seconds. Now, folks, I can run a 100-meter dash in 19 seconds. And most NFL linemen, in fact, I'm willing to bet all NFL linemen can do a 100-meter dash in 19 seconds. I'd be shocked if there's an NFL lineman that couldn't do 100 meters in 19 seconds. But with that being said, I want you to picture all of the large 350-pound NFL linemen. And is there anyone there that can run a marathon in 2 hours and 10 minutes? I'm willing to bet the answer is no. And with that being said, I don't even know if those guys could even drive a marathon in 2 hours and 10 minutes. But the point, I know I sure couldn't, and I'm not trying to say that I'm a marathon guy by any means. But the point is this, that lady in Birmingham just did a 19-second 100-meter dash. She did not run a marathon. One good trade does not a trader make. And with that, she understood, and I hope she meant what she said when she said, I don't expect that every day. So with that, the moral to the story is that don't necessarily rely on one big trade to continue to happen in the same way. Now, in terms of the risk, let me ask you this. Were you short the stock market back in 2008? And if the answer is no, then you probably did lose some money. Now, this leads us to our next question. When we were talking about a few slides earlier in terms of why you would consider the currency marketplace, or at least being neutral in the currency marketplace. Many people have a bullish bias towards stocks, and rightfully so. Stocks have been, for major asset classes, they've been the highest performance, or the highest performing major asset class over the course of the last 100 years. And that's even with the 40% decline that we had recently. No, that's fine. Now, keep in mind, I do need to mention this, there's no guarantee or law that says you have to be bullish on stocks. I know it's very likely there's at least one person in the audience that says, well, no, I'm not bullish on stocks anymore. But with that being said, let's say that you have this bullish bias on stocks, and you have a hard time pulling the trigger when it comes to shorting a stock, when it comes to buying a put on a stock, when it comes to doing a put spread, or something to where you're bearish on a stock. If that's the case, what other options are available? Currencies. Now, let's talk about the ways with which you can trade currencies. There's essentially 3 ways with which you can do it. First way is what's known as the spot FX. Now, the spot FX, or the spot Forex, essentially what you're doing is you're trading the actual currency. Typically, you'll work with a Forex broker, and usually there's no commissions involved in the trade. Usually the Forex broker will actually take the other side of the trade. Now, the advantage of that is that it's very, very much a leveraged product. However, you need to understand that the person on the other side of the trade is taking the other side of the trade. The other thing that you need to have consideration of with the spot FX, there's really no regulatory body for it. Now, at OptionsXpress, we are considering bringing in the spot FX come later this spring. We probably will have it at our other broker, OpenECry. But with that, understand that if you get a bad fill on a trade on the spot FX, then you really don't have anyone to complain to because they're taking the other side of the trade. Now, that's something that you need to have a concern with if you're actually trading in the spot Forex market. The other way with which you can trade currencies is with currency futures. Currency futures are done on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. It's on the, I believe it's on the Globex platform. There is a regulator there, and that's the NFA, National Futures Association, and it's all done through the CME. So you have an intermediary there. Now, the main difference between the futures and the spot FX, and there's a bunch of them, but it's beyond the scope of today's presentation to go through all of them, the leverage isn't going to be quite the same if you were to do it on the futures side of it as if you were to do on the spot FX side of it. But folks, you still get a ton of leverage on it. If there's really not much, you're still getting quite a bit of leverage. Now, the final way with which you can trade currencies is through options. If you want to trade options on currencies, you can trade them on options on the futures, on the CME platform. But what we're here to talk about today are the options that you can actually trade based upon the spot FX product. Now, with that, the other disadvantage of doing the spot FX or the futures, you have unlimited risk theoretically if you're short. Now, one of the benefits of options is, let's say that you're long a call option, the most you can possibly lose, even if you're completely wrong and you're just totally out of it and you're just way off on that trade, the most you can possibly lose is the amount with which you invest. For a long call or a long put, you'll never lose more than you invest. On the future side of it, you run that risk. So let's talk about options on the Forex. At the ISE, these are the ticker symbols of the options with which you can invest, and you saw them on the opening slide. You can see we have CDD for the Canadian dollar or the loonie, EUI for the euro, BPX for the British pound, YUK for the yen, SFC for the Swiss franc, and AUX for the Aussie dollar. The benefit of using the ISE currency options, you don't have to have your account futures enabled, or you don't have to have a futures account. At OptionsXpress, we can get you futures enabled all within one account. But if you don't have a broker that does that, the benefit of the ISE options is that you can trade these just like you could an option on Google, just like you could an option on Home Depot, just like you could an option on any stock you can think of that's optionable in the U.S. So with that, it's a very simple product. Now, the other thing that you can do with these currency options is you can trade them in an IRA. So at the end of this presentation, we're going to talk about bond hedging. And let's say you have an IRA full of bonds, or at least a portion of the IRA has bonds in them. We're going to talk about ways with which you can use these in the longer-term section of your portfolio. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but briefly, with how you can hedge currency risk, even in an IRA.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. To find more podcasts on options, stocks, alternative markets, and market data, please visit www.ise.com/podcasts.